Welcome to the DeFi Standard. I'm Mickey B. Fresh, and today we're going to offer some deep insight and perspective into this crusade from Jay Clayton and the SEC, because that's what it is. This was a crusade launched on the digital asset space, and all the innovators in it, the market participants, the retail investors, the developers, and took its sights and went at Ripple after a couple small victories and attacked in such a way that damaged, collateral damage, what they were meant to protect, which was retail investors and consumers. Now, this is going to be packed with a lot of video clips, and it's going to really show what is in the mindset of Jay Clayton. Let's take a look here. Now, just to give some perspective on this clip, this is in front of the American Bar Association at Stanford Law. He's speaking in 2018, middle of 2018, and his response is so disturbing, and the awkwardness of this body language shows where he's coming from at that time. There was no wiggle room with him. Take a listen to this.
Or other places. The reason I'm mentioning this is I've heard from various innovators, particularly in blockchain, but not only, that they've decided to move their operations to Europe or Asia because they find that the regulatory environment is more favorable. So obviously, you're playing a very difficult balancing act of protecting the consumer, and so obviously you're playing a very difficult balancing act of protecting the consumer and enabling a fair market. But how do you absorb these insights and the inspiration from other markets?
So
He goes, and then he says this. This is just shocking, so I'm just going to warn you before you hear.
if people are leaving this jurisdiction because they think our model, then I'll start with the easy thing. If people are leaving the U.S. because they think our model for raising capital from the general public is too onerous, go. Just leave the U.S. because they think our model for raising capital from the general public is too onerous, go. Just leave, because it's a proven model. We can adapt to new technology, but the idea that
He just taunted Ripple and everybody else in the space and said, you don't want to comply with our regulatory expectations. He wanted anyone who issued cryptocurrencies, or just Ripple didn't necessarily issue, but that sold crypto assets in any way or manage them. Like, there is a need for private securities, but there are certain digital assets he could not understand. He wanted Ripple to register as like a broker dealer and then be under their regulatory mercy, basically, of everything. So I know we talk all about, well, is XRP a security? Is it not? Jay Clayton didn't care about that. He wanted Ripple under the SEC's mercy as a registered broker-dealer or whatever he could fit them in. And that's what he wanted. And then the escrowed XRP, he could have kept a disclosure regime that was so strict that would be hampered anything that Ripple could do. And let me make this clear here. Ripple does not need to sell XRP to be profitable. That's not the reason to continue on here. I know there's been a lot of talk of that, but let's be very clear. That's not why they want to keep the escrow. Ripple has big plans for that, and we'll get into that later in this video or in a future video. Jay Clayton was set on them complying. This is why there was a stalemate for years behind the scenes, and we heard nothing. XRP that Ripple held, they wanted to say that that was an unregistered security and they'd have to register with us. He said basically, leave. He just said, leave. That's what he said. I mean, that is just disturbing. And now let's hear what somebody like Hester Pierce says about that. Let's see her approach. And that's what the future CFTC chairman here, that's is what this came down to. This was a battle between the CFTC, the SEC, Ripple got thrown in the middle, and Ripple would not budge. And I don't blame them. There's a lot of people that have said, oh, well, Ripple could just settle. Well, what does that mean if they settle? What are they giving up? They are not going to register with the SEC when there's going to be future regulatory framework where the CFTC will be overseeing digital assets. Ripple's not an exchange. They're not an issuer of a private security. They have no reason why the SEC should be at their like totalitarian dictator. Because basically that's what they would be if they registered. And Kin and those other companies, they just folded because there's nothing they could do. Now, with Ripple, there's an XRP. It's so far out there, and there's so much potential at stake that to do that would be a non-starter. And this is where they both were, probably starting in 2018, 2019, and then it came to a head. And they refused to give any clarity around any other assets. Now, the question is, well, would that free up XRP there for all retail? And you know what? Ripple probably could have, agreed to that, and then XRP would have been fine on the market. But that wouldn't have been the answer. That would have been a bad move. Bad. And the escrow, which is the key here, can't be tied down as a private security like that. XRP is supposed to be the global liquidity solution. It's not a private security. There's no half in the middle here. Ripple's not going to settle like that. Now, there was Jay Clayton, in my opinion, they weren't intending to bring an enforcement action against Ripple. They just expected them to comply. And it's almost like Clayton, they were shocked that they couldn't, they refused. Like they're both on such opposite ends here. And this went on. And now XRP was then deemed a security by them, or accused to be in the law, in the enforcement action. And that was extreme. And then they went after Brad and Chris personally. And now, you know what? We're going to skip over Hester Pierce because I think we all know what she says. We're going to hear what Jay had to say about using enforcement actions against individuals. And now he's asked by a former SEC. And remember, this is in front of the American Bar Association.
Bringing it, and my enforcement colleagues can comment on this better than I can, but bringing a case against an individual on balance requires more time and more resources than bringing a case against an entity.
And Jay, it'd be worthwhile for you to explain to the room why that's typically the case.
Well, the stakes are different.
Right. A corporation can write a check, maybe get insurance, right, against some of the payments. You going after an individual, it's the individual's livelihood. The individual frequently has an indemnification agreement, all right, with the corporation. So in many situations, especially if the defense is successful, it's not going to cost them anything in order to be able to mount the defense. If the defense is unsuccessful, there's a separate set of litigation that can go on about whether you actually get the indemnification. But the rule of thumb, when I was at the SEC and in private practice negotiating against the SEC, is that degree of difficulty going.
Listen to what he says right here. He is told by former SEC official who was on both sides. Listen to what he responds back to what he said. He says the degree of difficulty for the SEC to pursue individuals. Now, it's not mentioned in this video, but they're assuming this is all in fraud and scams and criminal activity. Remember, this case, there was no fraud because there was no way to prove any fraud. It was not even close. If they could have, they would have tried. So listen to how Jay Clayton responds right at the end. Like, that's so telling.
After any individual significantly higher than going after the corporate entity.
but it may be worth it.
Any individual significantly higher than going after the.
And he says it may be worth it. So was it worth it to go after Chris and Brad to destroy the whole XRP market and the market participants, the retail investors, and Ripple Company, the partners? Was it worth it? He says it may be worth it. So you could see where his head's at. He says it might be worth it. So this is one thing he was thinking of when they were bringing this enforcement. They kept probably building up the threats more and more and more. Well, we'll go after you personally. We're going to go after you personally. And you sold billions. I go, basically, we got to look at this from Jay's side. He just thinks they sold unregistered securities. That's it. You got to comply. There's no ifs or buts or nothing. We're not going to just let this go. And Ripple was not going to settle with them with that. There was no really wiggle room on either side. And Jay looks like he kept raising the stakes. And that lawsuit had two major impacts that were unnecessary. The lawsuit enforcement was unnecessary to begin with. He could have passed the information on to the next incoming chairman, where he was leaving anyway. But then he resigned the day before he drops the enforcement action, which enforcement action for a non-fraud case is a little over the top to begin with. But then they throw in there versus Brad and Chris. And then they add in there XRP still is security now. It's like they threw the kitchen sink to just try to give it as much weight as they could. And then he leaves the next day. So this was obviously building. Because remember in late fall, when Chris Larson and Brad Garlinghouse, they threatened to leave the U.S., they were taunting back at him because he's the one who probably said to them, go, leave. Well, I don't care. And that's when, Chris and Brad, it's just so ironic that he made this comment in that way a year and a half prior to them threatening that. And now every other regulator, every other industry, nobody's I've ever seen respond, oh, just leave. Every single response has always been, oh, we'll try, innovation here. We want to keep it in the U.S., One of the good actors in the U.S. He doesn't care. And nobody complied. And now it's all blowing up in their face with the interveners. That's what we are called now, is the word, interveners. We're going to take a look at the actual letter. This is the letter from Ripple, but what it does about the John Deaton intervener into the case. So the judge will be able to hear him. Now, this is so important because the SEC is saying they're trying to protect investors. That's their whole motto. I've seen this. They did a 700-page report on just the wording of fiduciary responsibility and interest of the retail. Like they're so focused on protecting the consumer, and the retail investor. And they always use that as to backstop everything. And they actually were the ones who didn't provide any clarity and left the retail investors thinking for 8 years. So right here, he says, the SEC was content to allow XRP and its associate technologies to evolve from promising digital asset with superior functionality into the third largest crypto digital asset after Bitcoin and Ether. During this time, the market participants, including interveners, reasonably believed that XRP was a digital asset falling outside the regulatory authority of the SEC. I'm going to be honest with you, that statement right there is what I truly believed as an XRP owner and ecosystem. And I've researched hundreds of hours, spent thousands of hours, and that is exactly what I felt, that, okay, this was going to go on for this long. This is going to happen. I mean, they're not going to deem these things securities after 8 years. That was what happened already. What were you waiting for? You already did Bitcoin, Ether, XRP is the same. And then you come in with this extremely vengeful lawsuit and then walk out the door. And And then the biggest thing here, and he mentions Grunfest in this conference. I'll post the link in the description below. It was a tough one to find. I got to see if I saved it. He mentions Grunfest, and Grunfest is the former SEC chairman who warned him 2 weeks before in a letter that if you bring this enforcement action, you're going to decimate the retail market and the market participants, the exchanges, the market makers, all the supporting stakeholders, the market itself, the wallet providers. Everyone has to delist. It causes major disruptions. He didn't care. He knew it was going to happen, and he willingly did that. So now the judge is going to hear John Deaton say that. And at this very time, what is one thing that I didn't really understand when John Deaton said it the first time, like he was like, well, I'm going to flank them on this side, which is a military term, while Ripple's going at it from here. And I was thinking how that's going to work. Now I understand and see it, that he's basically forcing the SEC to take a position on the XRP right now in the market. And the SEC is trying to they are just stubborn. They still want the optionality, they call it, to be able to say that, well, we're not saying it's a security right now in the market, but for the retail investors, so that John Deaton can intervene, but it's also an investment contract for Ripple, and it can't be both ways, because then they would be liable for all retail, and it's just that they've put the SEC in a position now where the magistrate judge has already said it has utility, it's being used, and it's obviously not a security now. And the SEC's literally, it's just falling apart at the seams. So let's move on into the next part of it, because this is really just at the heart of what's going to happen here. And then I want to finish us off. I'm going to explain where we are with the settlement, in my opinion, because I don't think it's necessarily going to happen the way people think. So the SEC included in its complaint is always a security. So they made it a point in the amended complaint to leave in there that XRP is a security now. And that's what has given John Deaton the ability and the XRP community to be heard, because they refused to drop that. And so this makes the SEC look even worse. I mean, the optics here are really bad, and they're going to get worse and worse and worse. So asking the SEC so basically we are, John Deaton and the XRP community, we're asking them to amend this complaint. Basically, XRP is not a security now. What will that do? So if that does take place here, that would be like definitely a rallying cry for the XRP. It's like the XRP army. I mean, this is one of those moments where the SEC has to actually, they can't defend themselves against the people they're trying to protect. It's literally puts them in a corner. And the judge, is obvious to the judge, because typically cases come in, they're there saying they're protecting the investors. They're going after the bad guys. They did this, and this. And Clayton brought this lawsuit on, and they used that language in the initial lawsuit that Brad was just made all this money, and they were dumping it on retail investors. To think that, oh, there's no way that anyone's going to back up Ripple and the company. I don't think the SEC nor Clayton really understood that there was a huge community behind this. I don't think they realized it at all. And now this is a total backfire in every possible way by getting involved. And the judge, and she's reasonable. This, in my opinion, this is going to summary judgment, and it's going to happen fast, or Gensler's going to bring this down to basically just saving face for the SEC. Unless something turns back to that side, it's doubtful, because it's only imaginable what went on behind the scenes with what the SEC did. Now, exchanges for years were asking, can we list it? All those different inquiries. They say, oh, we will be public facing. They didn't give any clarity on anything with XRP. All they had to say was XRP is not a security now. That's all they had to say. And they could have still pursued, but they made it a point. They wanted Ripple under their mercy and the escrow. That's what they wanted. They wanted them to register like as a broker dealer. Basically, that's what they were saying, but they don't get any of the benefits. That's not something Ripple, that's not even on the table if you understood what Ripple is trying to build with RippleNet and all the apps and everything that could be built on top utilizing that XRP. Now that escrow, that's why they're not handing anything over. And I keep saying that because they know the value of being able to utilize that for crypto economics, game theory, incentives. Like, that's where we need to look. That's what Ripple's looking at. The forward. Flare uses the whole escrow. They have escrows rewarding you to bring your asset onto the Flare network to be an FS, and you get yield every day for that. Well, Ripple's has this stockpile here. What they're just going to we don't need that, And it's not for them to profit. Everyone keeps saying, oh, they got to sell it. That's not what they need the escrow for. Please. Jeremy Hogan, he's excellent, but please tell him that they don't need to keep selling the escrow. That's not why they're not settling. I know he's kind of new to XRP, and he's been great. I really think he's done a phenomenal job keeping us all informed. And John Deaton, hats off. This really could go down in history as one of the stories. This is a turning point for how digital assets are now coming into that moment where we're seeing the applications being built. We're seeing the utility. We're starting to see the DeFi with the financial applications. It's no longer like, oh, there's just a speculative trading and everything runs through the exchanges. No, the industry and market's evolving so fast where, yes, it's still really, really early days, but it's still rapidly evolving so quick. And it's only a matter of time before the CFTC steps in. They'll be the regulator. And Chris Brummer is probably one of the most intelligent people in the whole space. If you've watched his videos, he's been speaking to central banks. He spoke to every company. He's literally interviewed everybody who I've seen in this whole cast of characters. Brad Garlinghouse, Hester Pierce, Gensler, William Hinman. He's interviewed all of them. So he is going to be extremely friendly at the CFTC. Now, they're the regulator for the digital assets, not the SEC. And the SEC is overstepping. Now, when Congress goes to make their decisions on legislation, this case is getting attention. It was bad enough. In 2018, Congress wrote to them and said, provide clarity. So you know what they did do? I'm not going to bring it up now. They provided like an expanded Howey list with like these. It was ridiculous what they asked for. And it was the opposite of clarity. And now, now leading up to the final year, I think it's important to note this, and I don't hear this said enough. Giancarlo, who was the former CFTC chairman, came out publicly with a legal opinion in one of the law, not magazines, but like the law articles from a law perspective of why XRP is not a security. It catches all the media attention, and now that was done about 5 months before they file a suit. How is it that they just were basically at a standstill here? But there definitely was a regulatory gangsters basically battling over turf. And the SEC and the SEC, they met in October together to try to make, they signed like this agreement, but they never talked about digital assets in any of it. It was all about like swaps and other things like that. But digital assets are the closest to commodities of anything. Really, commodities and currencies, they only could be considered securities at the beginning stages. But now the industry has innovated around that too. So now the SEC is going to be out of the loop more with all these airdrops and fair distributions and yield farming. The SEC can't touch any of that stuff. They're not raising funds in the same way ICOs did, but they're still getting the assets out there and still innovating. And that's what Jay didn't understand. The industry is going to continue to innovate right around you unless you provide a regulatory framework that's going to work within that new technology. And honestly, the regulation could be better. They're so stuck in their old ways. Remember, this is the old guard. They're trying to keep things the way they are. And this stalled Ripple. There's no doubt that this delayed Ripple. So here's the final piece right here. And this pretty much nails it. If the SEC, this puts them in a position where they have to make a choice. So I think it's not too far off that we could see one of these days, so be prepared for this, that the SEC will seek to establish that only the manner in which defendants marketed and sold XRP, their sales were an investment contract. And it will not seek to establish that secondary market XRP transactions violate the Securities Act. Now, that's what they probably should do, but they can't do both of these. If, however, the SEC refuses to clearly state its position on these issues, interveners' interest in the outcome of this litigation will be different. So basically, he's saying if they don't drop that, then Deaton gets to come in there and just keep speaking, or they want him to, and she's already granted that. And this is the SEC's got to make a decision. Do they want the embarrassment of the XRP community literally just exposing the SEC for what it is? I mean, this is what's coming if Deaton's going to be able to get up there and say everything that's the truth. That's the truth. You hurt retail because you were going after Ripple for something that was just an accusation at best. So this is a long, hard-fought battle. But I think, you know what? I got to say, the settlement, I don't think it's going to happen until Gensler gets in there, actually. And what's going on with that, I don't know. But I'm not going to speculate about him getting in there or not. What I'm speculating about here is what is the reason why would Ripple settle? What is it that they would settle with? That, everyone's like, oh, they're going to settle. But what? The SEC wants them to register with them. They will not accept a kin thing. That XRP that they have, they're not going to accept anything with that. So do not expect a settlement unless the SEC is going to literally bring it to just saving face. Or I think it's possible. I think what's more likely here is they give up on XRP being a security now, and they come out, they have to say it publicly that, or in the courts, that XRP is not a security anymore. We get listed back on exchanges. We get a nice boost back to adoption. The ecosystem comes back. We get back on exchanges. We definitely see some activity then in the markets. And I'm not going to speculate on price, but it was definitely going to be a push. And then that would continue. Then they would continue on with the case, and that would then end in summary judgment, and SEC is going to lose. I mean, it's pretty. That's what I think. I see this going down as settlement. I think is still possible, but wouldn't we be good if they could just clear XRP and then it gets back on all exchanges? We get going. And then, okay, if it's a couple more months till Ripple really gets out of the lawsuit, it's not the end of the world, because then at least the ecosystem can get going, because things are moving fast. And at this pace, I don't want to lose any time. So John Deaton's move and the community honestly could be remembered as such an important factor. And it goes to prove, you're coming at these decentralized networks that have communities, and you're trying to come down on the one who just created the ledger. They don't, all the transactions that take place, nothing to do with Ripple. Ripple, there's 150 validators. Ripple has 6. And then they have someone at testnet. 6. That's it. And the nodes, I've heard a lot of this going around. Ripple does not run the big nodes that take all the transactions of the network. They run independently by the foundation. We say Win and some other ones. Ripple does not have, if Ripple went away, that ledger would run robustly like nothing happened. And I think that's important to note with that many validators and the expansion now with Flare and the two-way bridge there. I think we could see even a further decentralization with possible UNL overlapping, like a second UNL, which would then really decentralize the network even further. I think that there is more for them to go with that, but right now, there's never even been a hiccup. Nobody's ever censored anything. The amendments, if anything, Ripple's been vetoed on something they wanted to put in, or they didn't get something passed that they wanted. And it's happened a couple times. So it's really a very difficult argument to make that XRP security now. There's no way they should even be saying this, and it's a joke, and it's an insult to you and your intelligence and mine that the SEC has the audacity to be able to go there in court. So I'm all for John Deaton doing that and defending us, because right before Christmas that was done, and that part did not need to be put in the case. And they did it just out of spite to add a little oomph to the case, because there was really not much there to begin with. So I don't blame them, and I think we're going to see something. So those are my thoughts. It's all speculation. I am not a financial advisor, but I am Mickey B. Fresh, and I'm out.